For millennia, the greatest empires the world had ever seen made the exact same catastrophic mistake. They looked at the Iranian plateau and saw a prize worth taking. The Macedonian armies of Alexander the Great swept in with unstoppable force. The Iron Legions of Rome marched east with absolute certainty. Arab warriors riding the momentum of a blazing new faith crashed through its gates. And the Mongol hordes of Genghis Khan, the most terrifying military machine the ancient world had ever produced, reduced entire cities to ash and built towers from the skulls of the dead. Any other civilization would have ceased to exist, permanently. They would have dissolved into history's long graveyard of forgotten peoples, just like the Babylonians, the Hittites, the Assyrians, names we now only read about in museums, cultures that were conquered, absorbed, and erased.
But something happened with Iran that defies every rule of history. They didn't disappear, they didn't assimilate. Instead, the conquered began to conquer. Within decades, sometimes within a single generation, the brutal invaders who had torn Iran apart by force were speaking the Persian language, writing Persian poetry, wearing Persian clothes, governing through Persian bureaucracy, and building Persian architecture with domes that touched the sky. The Macedonians became Persian. The Mongols became Persian. The Arabs leaned on Persian scholars to run their empire. Time after time, in one of history's greatest ironies, Iran lost the battle and won the civilization. How? How does one nation, across 5,000 years, against impossible odds, manage to outlast, outthink, and ultimately outlive every empire that tried to destroy it? How did they preserve not just their language and culture, but their very sense of identity through invasions, occupations, and catastrophes that would have shattered any other people on Earth? And how did it come to pass that this ancient land voluntarily abandoned its famous name and forced every nation on Earth to call it something new?
This is the story of how one civilization invented the very concept of time we live inside today. How they turned geopolitics into a cosmic war between light and darkness, and how they mastered the art of losing battles in order to win eternity. To truly understand Iran, you have to go back, much further back than most people think. The Western world has been taught to see Mesopotamia, Sumer, Babylon, and ancient Egypt as the twin cradles of civilization. In this familiar story, Iran barely gets a mention. That is one of history's greatest injustices. The Iranian plateau has been home to human life for tens of thousands of years. Neanderthals walked these lands 50,000 years ago. By 36,000 years ago, Cro-Magnons had replaced them. But the real turning point came with the rise of settled civilization. Archaeologists have uncovered urban-type settlements on Iranian territory, among them the Jiroft culture and the ancient ziggurat at Choga Zanbil, dating back 6,000 to 7,000 years. Ceramic vessels from the 4th millennium before Christ prove beyond doubt that one of the oldest civilizations on the planet was evolving right here, standing shoulder to shoulder with Mesopotamia and ancient China. The first major political power to emerge from this land was Elam, a sophisticated state in the southwest of modern Iran, with its capital at the great city of Susa. The Elamites were so formidable that by the 26th century before Christ, they were effectively dictating terms to the Sumerians. But the most extraordinary moment came in the 23rd century before Christ, when the Akkadian king Naram Sin went to war with Elam. The conflict didn't end with simple conquest or destruction. It ended with a written treaty, a document guaranteeing Elam's independence in exchange for aligning its foreign policy with Akkad. Pause on that. This is the first documented international treaty in human history. The Iranian plateau didn't just produce early civilization, it stood at the very foundation of global diplomacy. The people we recognize as Iranians today arrived sometime between the 20th and 15th centuries before Christ. Nomadic tribes descended from the north, from the steppes of Central Asia and the Caucasus, belonging to the vast Indo-European family of peoples. Their ancient language was a direct ancestor of Latin, Greek, and virtually every modern European language, including English. They were linguistic cousins to the Romans, the Greeks, and the Germanic tribes of Northern Europe. Settling onto this plateau, they called themselves Aryans, meaning noble, and named their new homeland Arianum Veja, the land of the Aryans. Over centuries, that word transformed into the name the world knows today, Iran. They mixed with the ancient Elamite culture and gradually organized themselves into powerful tribal confederations. The two most significant became the Medes and the Persians. And it was here, in these mountains and deserts, that Iran's true weapon was forged. Not cavalry, not iron, not walls, ideology. Long before Christianity or Islam reshaped the world, a religion was born on the Iranian plateau that fundamentally rewired human consciousness: Zoroastrianism. Founded by the prophet Zoroaster, this was not a religion of nature cycles or placating unpredictable gods. It presented the universe as the stage for a total, uncompromising war between two cosmic forces: Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of light, truth, and order, and Angra Mainyu, the spirit of absolute evil, deception, and darkness. But Zoroastrianism didn't stop at abstract theology. It drew a map. The realm of darkness was identified with the nomadic expanses to the north and east, the steppes from which raiders constantly poured in. To be Iranian was to be a soldier of light. The entire culture, its poetry, its governance, its wars, was built around the idea of actively participating in the defeat of evil. This gave the Iranian nation a unity and a sense of purpose that no army could simply destroy. And then, Zoroastrianism did something even more profound, something that would quietly reshape the entire future of human thought. It declared that time is not a circle, time is a line. The world had a beginning, it will have an end. History is moving toward a final confrontation between good and evil, a last judgment, a purification of the world by fire, a permanent victory of light. This idea was revolutionary. When the Persians conquered Babylon in the 6th century before Christ, they freed the Jews who had been held in captivity there. For 2 centuries, Jewish thinkers lived as subjects within the Persian Empire. During that intimate contact, the concept of linear time, the end of days, and final judgment flowed from Zoroastrian theology into Jewish thought, and from there into Christianity and Islam. Every time a Christian, a Muslim, or a Jew speaks of the end of the world, of Judgment Day, of history moving toward a final reckoning, they are speaking in a framework of time first built on the Iranian plateau. The first truly great Iranian state was Media, formed in 670 before Christ. The Medes had the raw power to destroy the fearsome Assyrian Empire, which had terrorized the ancient world for centuries. But their dominance didn't last. It was cut short by their own Iranian relatives, the Persians. In 550 before Christ, a man emerged who would change the world. Cyrus the Great, half Persian, half Mede, united the two peoples and began constructing what historians would call the Achaemenid Empire, the first true superpower in history. Cyrus was different. When conquerors of his era won, they enslaved populations, demolished temples, and imposed their gods by force. Cyrus did none of this. When he took Babylon, he freed the enslaved peoples, including the Jews, and allowed them to return home and rebuild their temples. He governed through respect for local customs and religions. His famous Cyrus Cylinder is considered by many historians to be the world's first declaration of human rights. His successor Darius I pushed the borders of the empire from Egypt in the west to the Indus Valley in the east. Nearly 50 million people, roughly half the entire population of the earth at that time, lived under Persian rule. Darius divided the empire into 20 administrative regions called satrapies, introduced unified taxation, minted gold coins known as darics, and built a network of roads so efficient that a royal postal system could carry messages across the empire at speeds that wouldn't be matched for centuries. We are taught in the West that the Greco-Persian Wars, the story of the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, the naval battle of Salamis, represented a great Persian defeat. That is a myth built from Greek sources. Yes, Greece defended its independence, but for the Achaemenid Empire, losing a handful of distant cities on its western fringe was strategically trivial. The Persians simply shifted tactics. They began funding the Greek city-states against each other, backing Athens, then Sparta, methodically bleeding the Greeks through their own rivalries. In 387 before Christ, the exhausted Greeks signed the humiliating King's Peace, a treaty entirely on the terms dictated by the Persian king Artaxerxes. What Persian armies couldn't take by force, Persian gold bought. Persia became the undisputed master of Greece without firing a single additional arrow. The Achaemenid Empire's real undoing came from within. It had grown so vast, governing such diverse peoples, that the center could no longer hold. When a young, brilliant, and dangerously ambitious king from Macedonia arrived with his professional army in 330 before Christ, he found an empire whose bureaucratic seams were already splitting. Alexander crushed the Persian forces and burned the magnificent palace complex of Persepolis to the ground. The 1,000-year Iranian story appeared to be finished. But this is where Iran's greatest power revealed itself for the first time. Alexander himself, the man who had burned Persepolis, began wearing Persian royal robes. He adopted Persian court ceremony. He married a Persian woman and encouraged his generals to do the same. The conqueror was being quietly absorbed by the conquered. When Alexander died and his Greek Seleucid successors took control, their Hellenization project suffocated on the thick, ancient weight of Iranian culture. In the 3rd century before Christ, the Parthians, another Indo-Iranian people, expelled the Greeks and built the Parthian Empire. Their ruler Mithridates I declared himself King of Kings, the ancient Persian royal title, and positioned himself as the direct successor to the Achaemenids. For 5 centuries, the Parthians used their legendary mobile cavalry and the famous Parthian shot, firing arrows at full gallop while retreating, to hold the expanding Roman Empire at bay, dealing it some of its most crushing military defeats in the Middle East. Then in 224 AD, a new dynasty rose from the Persian heartland itself. The Sassanids, hailing from the Pars region, the original home of the first Persians, seized power. They built a fiercely centralized state with Zoroastrianism as its official doctrine. Sassanid Iran was a genuine superpower, locked in an almost uninterrupted 4-century struggle with first Rome and then Byzantium for control of Mesopotamia and the Caucasus. Their armies clashed in some of the largest battles of the ancient world. Their architecture, art, and administration became models of sophistication that neighboring empires openly imitated. But 400 years of near-constant warfare drained the empire to its foundations. From the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, a force unlike any Iran had faced before arrived with the momentum of a new faith. The Arab Caliphate, energized by Islam, swept through the exhausted Sassanid Empire with staggering speed. In 651 AD, the Persian capital fell. The last Sassanid Shah was murdered.
For the first time in its history, Iran lay entirely under foreign rule, driven not just by political conquest, but by a religious mission to transform Iranian identity at its very core. The Arabs brought Islam and the Arabic language. Zoroastrianism, the faith that had sustained Iranian civilization for over a millennium, began to retreat. For any other culture, this would have been the moment of permanent erasure, just as it was for Egypt and Syria, which were permanently Arabized, losing their ancient languages and identities forever. The Persians did it again. Even as Arab rulers imposed political control and Islamic doctrine spread across the plateau, Iranian scholars, bureaucrats, and poets embedded themselves at the heart of the Caliphate's administration. The Abbasid Caliphate, the great Islamic empire of the 8th and 9th centuries, was run to a remarkable degree by Persian minds. Persian methods of governance became the Caliphate's governing methods. The Persian language not only survived, it flourished. The greatest scientific works, the most celebrated poetry, the most refined philosophy produced within the Islamic world were written in Persian. Iran had lost the political battle and won the cultural war. Then came the true apocalypse. In 1220, Genghis Khan arrived. The Mongol invasion was not conquest in any conventional sense. It was annihilation. Entire cities were depopulated. Ancient irrigation systems that had sustained Persian agriculture for thousands of years were deliberately destroyed. The accumulated wealth of centuries, libraries, universities, architectural masterpieces, was reduced to rubble. Iran's population collapsed. It seemed, finally, that this civilization had met the force that would finish it permanently. When Genghis Khan's grandson, Hulagu, founded the Mongol Ilkhanate on Iranian soil, history watched to see what would happen next. Within generations, the Mongols had converted to Islam. They had made Persian the official language of their state. They were commissioning grand Persian mosques with soaring blue-tiled domes, funding Persian scholars and poets, and patronizing Persian art with the enthusiasm of devoted admirers. The men who had come to erase Iran had become Iran. At the end of the 14th century, Tamerlane swept through again, erecting his signature pyramids of skulls across Iranian cities. Yet, simultaneously, he seized Iran's finest artisans and brought them back to his capital in Samarkand. His descendants, the Timurids, sparked a Persian Renaissance so brilliant it is still studied today. Courts of miniature painting, poetry, and philosophy that became the cultural envy of the world. For almost 300 years, political power in Iran belonged to Mongols and Turks. But every dynasty that sat on the Iranian throne was, within a generation or two, thoroughly and irreversibly Persian. Out of that long crucible, in 1501, a man named Shah Ismail emerged. He reunited the fragmented Iranian lands and founded the Safavid dynasty, one of the most consequential states in Iranian history. The Safavids made Shia Islam the official religion of Iran, permanently distinguishing it from the Sunni Ottoman world on its western border. This was a masterstroke of identity politics. Iran was once again architecturally different from the world around it, not just culturally, but theologically. A hard, specific Iranian identity had been reforged. By the 19th century, under the Qajar dynasty, Iran entered a period of deep crisis. Devastating wars with the Russian Empire stripped away Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan permanently. The early 20th century turned Iran into a chessboard for British and Russian imperial competition. The British extracted Iranian oil. Russian troops occupied the north. The Soviet Union even attempted to establish a communist republic on Iranian soil. The ancient land of the Aryans had become a colonial prize. Iran would not remain one. In 1925, Reza Shah Pahlavi seized power through a military coup and immediately launched a program of aggressive modernization and industrialization. Then, in 1935, he made a move that reverberated across every foreign ministry on earth. For centuries, the Western world had called this country Persia, a name loaded with images of fairy tales, carpets, and Oriental exoticism. Reza Shah sent a formal directive to every foreign embassy. The country is to be called Iran, the land of the Aryans. This was not bureaucratic housekeeping. It was a declaration of identity. We are not your exotic colony. We are not a relic of romantic legend. We are a modern nation with ancient roots, and you will see us as we see ourselves. The 20th century continued to test Iran's capacity for radical reinvention. Decades of foreign interference, political turbulence, and the suffocating pressures of Cold War geopolitics built toward a detonation. In 1979, the Islamic Revolution overthrew the monarchy. Iran became a theocratic republic. Today, a stunning paradox sits at the heart of how the world perceives this civilization. The word Iran triggers, for most people, images of geopolitical tension, sanctions, proxy conflicts, and grim headlines. Yet the word Persia, the very name Iran discarded in 1935, has taken on an almost mythological glow. Persia means poetry, grandeur, lost empires, flying carpets, and timeless sophistication. Two names, one land, and an endless, invisible war over who gets to define what it means. Across 5,000 years, this civilization built the ultimate mechanism for survival. Macedonians, Arabs, Mongols, they all arrived with the power to destroy. None of them left without being changed. Iran absorbed its conquerors, reprogrammed them, and sent them back into history wearing a Persian face. They stood at the foundation of world civilization. They invented the framework of linear time inside which all of human history, including yours, is still unfolding. They forged the concept of a cosmic war between good and evil that echoes in every major religion on Earth. But perhaps their most defining battle is the one happening right now. Not on any battlefield, not in any negotiating room. The battle over memory itself, over whether history will remember the empire or the headlines, the poetry or the politics, Persia or Iran. Because behind the simple name of a country, there is always a story. And sometimes, that story is 5,000 years old and refuses, absolutely refuses, to end.